Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to finish up today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. Today's special selection comes at us from Jerome, A Light in the Dark, Aimless, in the same vein as Sorrow Plagues, black metal very much influenced by shoegaze and post-rock. I'm confident you'll also like this. It's from the same artist that composes and produces Abstract Void. It's been a while, but it was a synthwave black metal project I listened to about a year ago. I remember Abstract Void a bit. It's very rarely that we hear black and synthwave, so that was something that stuck with me. Um, by the description, it sounds like we're going to be getting into some shoegaze, though, so I guess some repetition and a lot of 16th notes, possibly tremolo picking, are in order. I'll set my mind right. Let's dive into this. Aimless. I don't think that vocal style will ever work for me with this type of music. Very clean drum production though, given that it's shoegaze and black metal. Random jazz drums. Yeah. It's interesting. Everything about this tells me that the drummer is they've played jazz before. Either that or they're just really good at studying genres and picking up the tendencies within them. Very much night drive kind of music. Windows down, chilling, breeze in your hair. cymbals are consistently just a hair bit too loud for me, though.
Between the life and dreams, as if you trapped within.
I don't know, man. Kind of ruined the pacing a little bit there for me, at least. I was really settling into that. Is that just a way to return back to our A section? Interestingly enough, the double bass I think works better than the alternating bass and snare. And I don't really know why. I think it's really neat having this intro and outro bookend the track and provide us the harmonic information devoid from the production. Yeah, so a gorgeous track. Those 7.5 minutes went by really quick, especially once we got past our A section, which, funny enough, is also what kind of messed things up for me at the end as well as the return to what I think was a return to the A section. I guess in that view, it's no surprise the blackened elements were the ones that were more difficult for me to get into. Not that shoegaze is something I'm particularly fond of, but for whatever reason, I was kind of getting into the atmosphere of this one. I mean, part of it I think is just I turned my brain off. Right at a certain point in here, about 3 minutes in, I was like, okay, I have the gist of this. We're changing things up rhythmically, but not really anything else. And that rhythmic change up is primarily coming from the drums as we are slowly doubling things up. We were doing, a snare hit once a bar and then twice a bar, and then we now have two bass kicks a bar, and now a bass kick every beat, and now we're alternating bass, that kind of deal where we slowly speed things up, but nobody else was doing this, and the melodic instruments weren't changing up what they were playing, and so a lot of it just comes down to this really great texture work and the atmosphere of it, and you really got to connect with that on an emotional level, because from a theoretical one, purely, breaking things down by what they're doing, it's not interesting. And so once I turned the analytical side off and started to engage with it emotionally and just enjoying the ride of it, the song was over before I knew it. And that's going to be true with a lot of post rock and even black metal sometimes, shoegaze, any of these hyper repetitive styles of music. Um, there's stuff to glean from them when you look at them from a purely intellectual, analytical angle, but there's usually more to get from them on an emotional level. And that's something I'm trying to do more of in these reactions is once I've reached the point where I find there's nothing left to listen to, is to just feel it out and see what's going on there, trying to connect with it that way as well. And through that, yeah, I ended up enjoying this quite a bit, more so than I think I would have. Um, so we start the song off with the bookend section where we have just an acoustic guitar or maybe a clean electric playing the a modified version of the core chord progression. Instead of just playing the chord straight out, we take two of the notes and bounce between them and move with the chord accordingly. We take this idea, we strip it down to just the chord, and we kick in the overdrive, and we just play the chord a lot. 16th notes is what it sounds like to me. And that leads us through pretty much the entire track. The drums change up every once in a while. We have our A section, which we will revisit later with the alternating snare and bass kick. The vocals come in, they are hyper compressed, tucked way into the mix. They're these really nasally harshes, um, very much a black metal style of scream or of harsh, whatever you want to call it. And we do this for a little bit before backing the drums down, taking the vocals out, and playing pretty much straight shoegaze for the next 4 minutes of the track, exploring different textures, slightly modifying the chord progression, and mostly the any of the division in this little gap here is rhythmic as the drums continue to remove or add different types of instruments. Like I had mentioned earlier, slowly increasing the number of times each instrument gets to play each bar. We build this up over like 3, 4 minutes, and then we have a break for a sound bite of what's like a tram station or subway station, an announcement overhead. And then we go back into the black metal alternating snare and bass kick. We bring the vocals back in after 16 bars of that. And then we do more shoegaze stuff to wrap it up. It really does feel like, to me, a bouncing back and forth and trying to balance the more aggressive blackened side with the more alluring shoegaze side and trying to justify the blackened bits against the shoegaze parts, which sounds like a really weird way to write music, but that's probably not what's happening. It's just my interpretation of the song. Because aside from the drums, which bounce back and forth between these two styles, the only other instrument that feels blackened at all is the vocals. And as I mentioned at the beginning, they feel so out of place. The guitars, the drums, they all have this beautiful soundscape to them. All these textures, the distortion, the crackle, the compression with these beautiful chord progressions. It's very uplifting and powerful, especially when we get a couple of the chordal twists that push more towards an uplifting resolution than more of the cyclical stuff that we get through a majority of the track. And then against all that, we just have this dude screaming, but it sounds like he's in another room. Like we're hearing a muffled version of it. We have this beautiful shoegaze band that we're listening to a concert, and next door, this dude yelling is bleeding through, and that's what it feels like to me. It's out of place. It doesn't match the emotional resonance, which I'm sure is what people come to this type of music for. It's that contrast between the two. the beauty of shoegaze with the gnarliness of black metal. I'm not here for it. I can appreciate it for what it is. I can appreciate that people would enjoy it, but as many times as I've heard people explain, what they enjoy out of it, I can only appreciate it from a distance. It's not something I feel I can connect with. It's too distant, and so I get a chuckle out of it at the beginning because it's just so different. It's like I don't even know. It's like watching a Disney film, hand drawn, and out of nowhere it turns into like this violent 2000s adult animation instead of, or even 90s. Like it turns into like Aeon Flux or something for a moment, or like heavy metal. You guys remember that? Man, I feel old bringing that up. I don't remember too much about that or the sequel, Heavy Metal 2000. I don't know if I should watch them again. Anyways, we got to get back on this. Light in the Darkness. That's what it feels like, though. It feels like we start off with like Beauty and the Beast, and then midway through, it's like a different animation team takes over, and they keep the style but shift the visual language. So we get something that's more violent out of it, more mature. And that's exactly what this feels like, where we have this really bright, uplifting, hopeful music and it's beautiful, and then this dude just starts screaming, and it will never not make me laugh, at least on a first. The second time it came in I was expecting it, right? But there's just something about it that's completely unexpected and touches on a bit of absurdity almost to me, in a way that's comical. I'm a big fan of absurdist humor, so that's the exact funny bone it tickles. um and I can't take it seriously. I feel like this is getting real subjective, so I'm gonna flip it back a little here. But yeah, it just doesn't work for me. It really doesn't feel so weird. But aside from the vocals, nothing else is blackened, and I think that doesn't help with the division either. I think if the drums had kept up with the blackened element, or if the vocals were more consistently present, it would not feel as out of place as it does. Um, but again, it being out of place could very well be the intention of it. The fact that it rubs so hard against the beauty of the other half of this song could be why people are drawn to it, could be why people make it. It's the duality of the thing. Just because it doesn't work for me doesn't mean that it's a bad choice. So the rest of the song, though, we get away from the blackened elements, so it's just straight up shoegaze. And like I'd mentioned, it's not particularly interesting on a theoretical level. It's not really something worth breaking into. A lot of it is the same 16 bar cycle for like 3 minutes, where the only change comes from the rhythmic patterns in the drums. So I don't know that there's too much to dig into there, other than that it's just a very bright, hopeful sound. And so to me, I get this agonizing wallowing against a brightness, against a hopefulness, and those two once again don't really check out. Um, they run counter, and again, maybe that's the purpose of it. It's contrast, and it certainly draws attention to itself. But with the vocals so far pushed into the mix, it's really difficult for me to figure out what's going on in there. I can't hear what they're saying, and that's not helping the fact that I'm not liking the sound together, and I don't know. I feel like this just took a really negative turn. I do really appreciate the bookends, though. Like I had mentioned, they give me a bit of the harmonic information without all the distortion and texture and destruction around the guitar work, which isn't as bad as some of the other shoegaze we've heard, and even black metal. There's actually a real clarity in production here. The drums can clearly be heard, all of them. The guitars can clearly be heard. The vocals are still kind of clear despite being pushed into the mix. And so there's a lot of spaciousness to everything that, despite it being shoegaze, which is typically hyper compressed, it's actually sort of medium wise. and that there's enough space between everything that I can clearly hear all the instruments at play, despite the genres that it pulls influence from. I think it's fascinating. This is extremely high fidelity production, uh, even more so comparative to the styles of music that we have here. And that's an interesting decision, but I think it ultimately ends up working. My one production issue is the cymbals. The crash and the ride are just way too loud over on the right side. I don't know what decision it was to do that. I mean, it could also just be hardware, right? Maybe it doesn't sound so bad on their studio monitors, but the headphones accentuates it. My specific headphones, my specific, EQ, what I have on my system and all that, my audio interface. There's so many different elements between how it's produced and how it's listened to that you can't make it perfect for everyone. But at least for my experience, it was just a hair bit too loud. Not too much, but enough to distract me. Um, I guess that's really about it. Yeah, hit some lyrics. Lyrically, wow. Um, so the title is Aimless, and that shows up in our first stanza. The cold autumn wind is your only friend this night. You wander alone aimlessly in the in the night that never ends. So yeah, that's kind of sad. It says there was a time when I cared, but now it's all in vain. You just let the wind to take you away between the life and dreams as if you're trapped within. How can you find the trace? How do you know where to go? Always back to this familiar place which now feels so unknown. This is very blackened. None of the hopeful, brightness, optimistic elements in the guitar work show up here at all. In fact, the shoegazy bits betray an underlying despair to the lyrics that fit perfectly well with the black metal vocals. It's about somebody who walks in circles aimlessly. They never know where they're going, but they always wind up right back where they started, which is alone, trapped in this despair, is what I get out of it, at least. Um, Not where I was expecting the lyrics to go at all, given the musical themes. And in that vein, it both works and doesn't for me. I mean, if we're talking about thematic cohesion, it perfectly lines up with. Oh, well, okay. Let me cycle this back a little bit. It perfectly works with the or with the vocals, of course. The vocals are blackened. A lot of black metal tends to deal with topics like this. It really works well with that genre of music. It doesn't really work well with the music, the harmonic themes of the music, which tend to be a bit more bright and uplifting. However, it does work with the cyclicality of the music. After all, I mentioned how our B section, the straight shoegazy bit, was not really going anywhere. The drums continued to increase their complexity, but nothing else really changed, and so we had a quickened pace, faster movement, even if our tempo was static. But we ended up in the same place we started, which was our A section. We left our A and returned back to our A without really going anywhere, almost just spinning our tires. It could even be that the shoegazy sections, the uplifting elements of the music, the positive harmonic resonances, are designed to possibly be an aspiration that is never reached or to showcase the environment around our narrator. Or, I guess, around our main character. The narrator speaks about somebody in the second person. says the wind is your only friend, you wander alone. So we do have a protagonist and then a narrator who speaks about them. And so, if we separate the music from the vocals, which isn't exactly supported by the production where the vocals are stuffed into the music, but we could even see this division there where the vocals are always blackened, but the music sort of dances between the two shoegaze and blackened elements, in which case we see this stark divide between the brightness and uplifting elements in the music and the lyrical and vocal delivery aspects, which are fully rooted in this despair, and them never being able to make that connection and bridge that space into finding the uplifting elements and getting out of this cycle. Feels like I'm grasping at straws a little with that, but I'm gonna roll with it. Um, I do want to clarify real quick. I was a bit harsh on the track there at the end, but I did genuinely enjoy my time listening to it, and now having read the lyrics, I do think it works well on an artistic level. I'm still not a big fan of the blackened parts, and they feel a bit out of place to me on a purely musical level, purely listening to it. But on an artistic level, I do believe it all comes together in a way that is satisfying, where both sides serve purposes. Those are my thoughts on A Light in the Dark's Aimless. What did you think of this? Was there anything that stood out to you? Anything you'd like to add on to what I said? Correct me on, give me your own perspective on any of that. Let me know down in the comments section above that. In the description box, you can find a link to Linktree. Here you can find links to my music, a way to support, multiple ways to support the channel, and a link to the Discord server. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell, I greatly appreciate all three of those. That's it for today. Check you guys tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC. As usual, we're going to wrap up this week's theme, explore our final special selection for the week, and check out our creator request. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.